Welcome to Slumbering Sagas, where we embark on journeys to uncover the chapters of history obscured by time. The mysteries lying beneath millennia of dust. Today, we begin a singular expedition, an exploration into the invisible realm of human memory. We are not telling the tale of empires consumed by the fires of war, nor the story of powerful pharaohs or magnificent pyramids built to flaunt boundless might. This narrative concerns a collapse that occurred in silence, a disappearance so tranquil it is almost implausible. We are speaking of the Indus Valley Civilization, IVC, an ancient society of near perfection that shaped a refined existence 4,500 years ago, only to vanish abruptly into the historical mist. Imagine this: an ancient world devoid of grand tombs, lacking tyrannical palaces, and free from fierce, warring deities. Instead, there was an absolute prioritization of order, sanitation, and subtle harmony. This was a society largely characterized by the absence of warfare. Evidence of widespread armament and combat is strikingly rare. Around 2600 B.C.E., when other civilizations struggled for survival, the people of the Indus were constructing cities of masterful scale. Mohenjo-daro and Harappa stand as masterpieces of urban planning. Their main thoroughfares were laid out on a perfect grid system, aligning almost precisely to the north-south and east-west cardinal points. Architectural studies reveal that every dwelling was built using fired bricks of a rigorously standardized size, maintaining a consistent $4 to $1 ratio. This profound uniformity in material and planning, spanning an estimated 3 million square kilometers larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined, forces scholars to pose a crucial contradiction. How could such a massive empire maintain such strict standardization for centuries without clear evidence of a centralized, authoritarian regime? Their focus lay on the Great Bath and the incredibly advanced drainage systems running beneath every street, a feat of civil engineering that many modern cities would not achieve for thousands of years. The quiet dignity of these ruins suggests a society where respect for public order and citizen health seemingly outweighed the ostentatious display of individual power. But the greatest mystery is not how they built it, but why they abandoned it. What caused a thriving civilization, which maintained harmony for centuries, to dissolve without the clear marks of large-scale military devastation? We will walk through these quiet streets, touch the forgotten fired bricks, and try to heed the whispers from the dust. We will not seek a single answer, but rather the complex interplay of theories that continue to spark fierce scholarly debate. Was it a merciless climate shift that starved the rivers of their lifeblood? Paleoclimatology studies hint at a major global drought event around that time. Was it the capricious nature of the Mother Indus River itself, shifting its course and withdrawing sustenance? Or was it perhaps a subtle, internal social decline, a quiet weariness, or even, as older research suggested, an invasion whose evidence is now largely refuted? Over the next 60+ minutes, we will immerse ourselves in every fragment of this puzzle, exploring the refined beauty of the civilization that shaped the ancient world and feeling the quiet pathos of its trumpetless end. This is a long and reflective journey. I invite you to join me as we seek to unravel the greatest enigma, the silent disappearance of an entire age. Let us begin. As the great rivers of the world, the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, nourished the cradles of civilization. They birthed societies driven by monumentality, hierarchy, and often, perpetual conflict. Yet, along the Indus River and its now extinct sister river, the ancient Gagar-Hakra system, a civilization flourished with a philosophy fundamentally different. The people of the Indus were not builders of imposing vanity, but rather architects of organized perfection. Around 2600 B.C. E. During the mature Harappan phase, when the world's most powerful nations were cementing their hierarchies with colossal stone, the inhabitants of the Indus Valley executed a quiet, brilliant urban revolution. Great cities like Mohenjo-daro, the Mound of the Dead, and Harappa were not organic agglomerations of growth. They were the product of meticulous, almost obsessive pre-planning and an unparalleled collective will for order. Their design philosophy was one of deep-seated symmetry and predictability. The cities were structured on a near-perfect grid system, with wide, straight avenues running precisely from north to south and east to west, intersecting at absolute right angles. This sophisticated urban blueprint was a master model, replicated not only in the colossal capitals, but also in dozens of smaller towns and villages across the vast $1.3 million square kilometer territory, an area larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. This profound, unrelenting homogeneity across such vast distances and maintained across centuries raises the first, and perhaps most defining, scholarly contradiction of the IVC. The engineering marvel of standardization, the very foundation of their urban stability lay in their materials. Architectural analysis confirms that every single fired brick, the material of choice, offering superior durability against flooding and erosion compared to the sun-dried mud bricks used elsewhere, adhered to a strict, universal dimension ratio of $4 to $1. This ratio was not an approximation. It was a near absolute standard, applied to bricks used in residential walls, municipal structures, and the massive city fortifications alike. To appreciate the scale of this feat, consider the logistical challenge. Maintaining this consistency required centralized control over clay sourcing, firing kilns, and labor management across an area spanning over 1,000 miles. This suggests an administrative structure of extraordinary competence and longevity. While in Mesopotamia, the size and quality of bricks often reflected the wealth of individual temples or rulers. In the IVC, this standard was democratic and universal. This consistency immediately begs the question: who possessed the central authority to enforce such universal codes of engineering and construction? The traditional interpretation, the central authority argument. This school posits that such rigorous control over infrastructure, materials, and labor must be the work of a powerful, unified state, functioning perhaps not from a visible palace, but from an invisible bureaucratic center. Proponents point strongly to the remarkable uniformity of the weights and measures found across the civilization. Perfectly cut, highly standardized cubic stone weights, used for trade and taxation, are undeniable evidence of tight state control over commerce, manufacturing, and resource allocation. For them, this administrative reach implies an absolute, if subtly managed, political authority that ensured economic stability. The contrarian debate, the argument for non-coercive rule. Conversely, the overwhelming and consistent lack of physical evidence for the typical trappings of coercive power remains the bedrock of the opposing argument. Archaeologists have struggled to definitively uncover structures that scream power or dynasty, palaces, and temples. There are no structures identifiable as dedicated royal residences or massive, centralized temple complexes that consumed immense resources, unlike the ziggurats of Sumer or the great temples of Karnak. Monuments of self-glorification. The IVC left behind virtually no colossal statues, stelae, or reliefs dedicated to an individual ruler, a conquering dynasty, or a singular deity. Military infrastructure. Crucially, there is a striking scarcity of offensive weapons, and fortifications rarely exceed simple, practical defensive walls. The resulting paradox is one of history's most profound. A civilization of colossal scale and technical brilliance that appears to have operated without kings, without standing armies, and without conspicuous aristocratic display. The revolutionary focus on public health and water management, instead of expending immense human and material energy on glorifying a singular elite, the Indus people channeled their collective will into public works, dedicated to sanitation and water management, a priority unmatched in the entire ancient world. The level of planning dedicated to hygiene is staggering. Every single dwelling, from the largest in the lower town to the smallest unit, featured its own private bathing area, a separate well or access to a communal one, and, critically, connected directly to an extensive covered underground drainage system. These main sewer lines, constructed with robust, expertly laid fired brick, utilized precise gradients to efficiently carry waste out of the city, often leading to sophisticated sumps or soak pits outside the walls. This massive commitment to hygiene suggests a societal value system fundamentally prioritizing collective health and ritual purity above personal opulence. It represents a philosophical shift. Power was invested in the stability of the collective, not the splendor of the few. The Citadel area, the elevated western mound found in major cities, is another point of intense focus and controversy. Unlike the acropolises of Greece or the temple enclosures of Mesopotamia, these platforms did not primarily house palaces or large-scale religious icons. They primarily contained large public structures. The Great Bath, this impressive, perfectly waterproofed tank, remains the subject of intense academic debate. Was it a massive, communal ceremonial tank used for crucial purification rites, implying a powerful, organizing priestly class? Or was it purely a major municipal water facility, serving a practical, civic function? The ambiguity perfectly mirrors the enigma of their entire society. The granaries, or great halls, huge structures adjacent to the citadel, once assumed to be large-scale state storage facilities for grain. However, newer archaeological analysis suggests these buildings may have been public assembly halls, workshops, or communal residential quarters, rather than state-controlled silos. This subtle reinterpretation reinforces the idea of collective organization over state control. Alternative models, and the philosophy of peace faced with the evidence, contemporary scholars have moved away from imposing the Mesopotamian model onto the IVC. Leading archaeologists, such as Dr. Jonathan Knoyer, propose that the IVC was governed by a multifaceted system of integrated heterogeneous power, likely a council of influential merchants, chefs, craft specialists, leaders of guilds, and spiritual leaders, priests, who ruled through consensus. Their authority stemmed not from divine right or military might, but from their ability to maintain the highly efficient trade networks and collective well-being that sustained the civilization. This model of non-coercive power suggests that social harmony was achieved not through fear or military imposition, but through a shared ideological commitment to order, cleanliness, and peaceful commerce. It was a civilization built on the principle of cooperation over conquest, allowing it to flourish in remarkable, sustained peace for centuries. They were the world's first great experiment in civilization without spectacle. But this very precision, this perfect, ordered peace, makes their ultimate collapse so heartbreakingly profound. A society that mastered order, that valued health over hierarchy. What force could possibly dismantle such a robust, finely tuned machine? The answers, as we shall see, lie not in the dramatic spectacle of invasion, but perhaps in the subtle, relentless shifts of nature, or a slow decay of the collective will. In our next segment, we will delve deeper into the enigma of their social structure, their subtle spiritual life, and confront the primary and surmountable obstacle preventing us from understanding the true identity and language of the Indus people, their undeciphered script. A life without kings, society, religion, and the art of serenity. If Section 2 revealed the physical and technical perfection of the Indus Valley Civilization, IVC, Section 3 now invites us into their intangible world, the realm of the spirit, language, and social structure. And here, the great questions intensify. The striking order in the IVC's urban planning hints at a collective authority, but the pervasive absence of visible symbols of power, no massive pyramids, no royal monuments, suggests a remarkably egalitarian society. At this precise intersection of contradictions lies the greatest mystery. Who were these people? What did they believe? And what sustained their peace for 7 centuries? A. The insurmountable barrier. The enigma of the Indus script. Our journey into the Indus mind must begin with the most frustrating barrier, the Indus script. While archaeologists have unearthed thousands of artifacts, from pottery sherds, copper tablets, to the iconic steatite seals bearing these cryptic symbols, we remain stubbornly unable to read a single word. This is the central tragedy. A great civilization left behind tangible evidence of literacy, yet the voice and meaning of their language have been entirely swallowed by time, characteristics, and scope. The Indus script comprises approximately 400 distinct signs. Crucially, the texts are almost universally extremely short, found primarily on the small square or rectangular seals. The average inscription contains only 5 characters. The longest legible inscription ever found contains a mere 26 symbols. The nature debate, the fundamental contradiction. This brevity is the subject of one of the fiercest ongoing controversies in ancient linguistics. School 1. The written language hypothesis. Proponents believe this is a genuine writing system. 1. This, whether logosyllabic or logographic, akin to Mesopotamian cuneiform or Egyptian hieroglyphs. They argue that the $400 dollar signs are too numerous for an alphabet, yet consistent with a system where symbols represent both objects and sounds. They believe the short inscriptions are merely titles, names, or short religious invocations. The search for a Rosetta Stone remains their hope. School 2. The non-linguistic sign system. The radical counter-argument. Led by researchers utilizing computational analysis, this school offers a radical rebuttal. The Indus script is not a written language in the traditional sense. They argue that the inscriptions are too short, lack the complex grammatical structure, and sign repetition expected of genuine language, and may instead be a collection of non-linguistic symbols, perhaps clan totems, merchant marks, religious motifs, or political emblems used purely for administrative and trade purposes. If this hypothesis holds true, the decryption key we seek may, tragically, not even exist. The inability to definitively categorize the script as language or symbol leaves every other interpretation of IVC, culture, religion, political structure, and even the causes of its decline as an informed, yet inherently speculative, hypothesis based solely on archaeology. The decipherment hypotheses. The battle for lineage. For those convinced it is a language, the debate centers on its linguistic root. The Dravidian hypothesis. The most widely supported theory links the Indus language to the Dravidian languages currently spoken in southern India and parts of Pakistan, like Brahui. The reasoning is based on linguistic typology and the geographical continuity suggested by some archaeological links. If correct, this would establish the Indus people as the ancestors of modern Dravidian populations, suggesting an ancient north to south linguistic migration. The Indo-Aryan hypothesis. A smaller group of scholars controversially attempts to link the script to Indo-Aryan languages, the precursor to Sanskrit and Hindi. This hypothesis faces significant chronological contradiction, as linguistic and archaeological evidence overwhelmingly places the major arrival of Indo-Aryan speakers after the decline and regionalization of the IVC. This profound, persistent silence from the Indus script is a silent, elegant reminder of the fragility of knowledge and the near insurmountable distance between us and the thoughts of these perfect city builders. B. Spirituality in silence. Religion and the absence of temples. The mystery surrounding the IVC's spirituality is equally deep. How could a civilization of this scale, flourishing in a region surrounded by monument-building cultures, leave no definite large temple structures? Religion was the most powerful organizing and motivating force in the ancient world. Yet here, it appears subdued and decentralized. Archaeological evidence. The fragmentary clues. We are forced to piece together their beliefs from tiny scattered artifacts. The Pashupati seal. The Proto-Shiva. This is one of the most famous and highly contested findings. The seal depicts a horned figure seated in a yogic posture, surrounded by animals. Scholarly controversy fiercely debates whether this figure represents a proto-form of the Hindu god, Shiva Pashupati, Lord of Animals. If this connection is valid, it provides a direct, enduring cultural and religious bridge spanning millennia into modern Hinduism. Mother Goddess figurines. Thousands of small, handcrafted terracotta figurines, overwhelmingly female, have been found. These are widely interpreted as evidence of the worship of a mother goddess or earth mother, emphasizing fertility, agricultural cycles, and the sanctity of life. The ubiquity of these small, personal icons suggests a pervasive, decentralized spiritual element. Yet this contradicts the absence of centralized temple architecture to host communal worship. Trees and water. The reverence for the peepal tree, sacred in later Hinduism and Buddhism, and the intense focus on ritual bathing, the Great Bath, suggests a profound spiritual connection to nature and the concept of water, purity. Analyzing the absence, the philosophical debate. The lack of colossal temples and large religious iconography has fueled a fundamental philosophical debate about the nature of power. The priest-merchant hypothesis. Scholars like Gregory Possehl propose that religious authority may have been vested in a priest-merchant class, who enacted rituals on a small, personal, or household level, rather than through large public gatherings. Their spiritual power may have resided in the control of perceived purity, ritual bathing, and knowledge, the script, the egalitarian social model. The lack of grand religious architecture can be interpreted as evidence that the IVC rejected the centralized religious model that concentrated power in the hands of a few priests or an elite. Spirituality may have been an integrated, unstructured element of daily life, intrinsically linked to urban order and cleanliness, a belief system that prized humility over grand spectacle. The famous, yet tiny, statue of the priest king, with his contemplative gaze and intricately patterned robe, embodies this enigma. Who was he? A king? A high-ranking priest? A successful merchant? The serene composure on his face defies our attempts to impose the power models of other civilizations onto the Indus society. He represents authority stripped of its usual aggressive trappings. C. Social structure. The gentle equilibrium. If the IVC lacked powerful kings, how was their complex social structure maintained? The evidence suggests a gentle equilibrium rarely achieved in the ancient world. Evidence of stratification. The subtle divides. Archaeology reveals subtle social stratification. Housing quality. Differences in housing size exist, ranging from small, two-room dwellings to larger courtyard homes, though extreme luxury is absent. Burial practices and wealth. Significant variation is found in burial sites. Some individuals were interred with precious gold and silver jewelry and highly valued carnelian beads, while others had few artifacts. The equality debate. The narrowing gap. Despite these differences, the narrowing gap. Most researchers agree that the wealth gap in the IVC was significantly narrower and less stark than the chasm separating the pharaoh from the commoner, or the Sumerian king from the peasant. The broad middle class hypothesis. The universal standardization and focus on public hygiene suggest a vast and healthy urban middle class. Wealth was likely measured by access to sophisticated craftsmanship and trade goods, like copper and gemstones, rather than by the ownership of vast estates or massive slave labor, which we see little evidence of. The self-regulating society. It is theorized that there might have been subtle social mechanisms or an ideological control put in place to discourage the ostentatious display of wealth, thereby maintaining stability and peace. It was a social experiment in allowing prosperity without the arrogance of individual grandeur. This organization was not merely a technical achievement, it was a philosophical choice. It was a society that accepted economic differences, but rejected differences in coercive power and spectacle. This delicate balance, this prioritization of communal order and shared cleanliness, was the foundational element that allowed the civilization to endure for 700 years in peace. Yet, this very serenity concealed a deep-seated vulnerability. A civilization so focused on internal harmony and non-aggression may have lacked the flexibility, military readiness, or ideological resilience needed to cope with external or environmental shocks. And those shocks, as we will explore in the coming sections, arrived relentlessly. We have traversed the complexities of Indus society and spirituality, from the locked language to the templeless religion. Next, we must understand how they interacted with the wider world and how their sophisticated economy was built upon vast international trade networks and footprints in the desert. Connecting with the ancient world. Having explored the architectural perfection and the subtle social serenity of the Indus Valley Civilization, IVC, it is time to expand our gaze beyond the fired brick walls. This civilization did not exist in isolation. They were global players, connected by a complex trade network stretching from the Indian Ocean deep into the Persian Gulf. The IVC built its prosperity on a foundation of merchant economics and highly refined craftsmanship, underpinned by the very precision we observed in their urban planning. This precision itself is the first powerful testament to their economic prowess. A. The supremacy of precision. The system of weights and measuresif. The Indus script remains silent. The smallest, most mundane objects of their daily life speak volumes about their economic organization. This is demonstrated by their rigorously standardized system of weights and measures. Standardization of weights. Hundreds of finely cut, cubic stone weights, crafted from materials like chert, agate, and jasper, have been unearthed across virtually every IVC site. These weights adhered to an incredibly strict system, beginning with a base unit of approximately $0.85 grams, then proceeding in a binary ratio. $1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, minus $, for smaller increments, before switching to a decimal ratio for larger masses. This precision is almost scientific in its application and scope. Scholarly contradiction on control. The very existence of this unified system sparks intense academic debate regarding the nature of their authority. The centralized economic control thesis. One school of thought argues that the absolute accuracy and uniformity of these weights and measures are irrefutable evidence of a powerful central government controlling all commerce. They contend that only a state authority, akin to the bureaucracies of Mesopotamia, could have manufactured, distributed, and enforced such stringent standards across a territory so vast. This suggests that while political power may have been decentralized, economic power was profoundly centralized. The free market hypothesis, the merchant guild's argument, the counter-argument, often favored by those emphasizing the lack of overt power structures, posits that this standardization is evidence of a highly sophisticated free market economy dominated by powerful, self-governing merchant guilds. In a vast, diverse trade network, trust is paramount, and the best way to build confidence between traders in Harappa and Lothal was a universally accepted, tamper-proof system of weights. This system, they argue, was self-enforcing through economic consensus rather than political coercion, driven by the merchant's need for reliability. Regardless of the mechanism of control, the success of the IVC was anchored in their ability to consistently produce high-quality goods and trade them efficiently with distant civilizations. B. Connecting with the ancient world. International trade. The Indus civilization was an indispensable node in the ancient global trade network. They acted as a nexus, exporting raw materials and refined craft goods, and importing metals and precious stones that were scarce within the Indus plains. The core evidence. The Mesopotamian link. The strongest physical evidence of the IVC's international reach comes from the archaeological record of Mesopotamia, Indus seals in the Gulf. Dozens of circular and rectangular seals bearing the distinctive Indus script have been discovered in major Mesopotamian cities, such as Ur, Kish, and the crucial maritime trade hubs of Bahrain, ancient Dilmun, and the UAE, ancient Magan. This is unassailable proof that Indus traders established permanent, operational trading posts overseas. Materials and technology. The IVC was the world's leading producer of highly sought-after carnelian beads and steatite jewelry. Their craftsmanship, including the complex acid etching technique used to create intricate patterns on the carnelian, was an Indus monopoly. These exquisite items have been found in the royal tombs of Mesopotamia, signifying their high value and the wealth generated by their export. Trade routes and the dependency contradiction. Maritime trade. The discovery of the ancient port city of Lothal provides tangible evidence of advanced naval technology and harbor planning. Seals and pottery depict large ships. The IVC is widely identified with the land of Meluha in cuneiform Mesopotamian texts, described as the source of copper, exotic woods, and semi-precious stones. The economic dependency debate. The crucial contradiction. A significant academic contradiction arises concerning the IVC's reliance on Mesopotamian trade. Some early historians speculated that the IVC's decline was directly linked to the decline of the Mesopotamian market in the late 3rd millennium B.C.E. However, most modern researchers refute this dependency. They argue that the vast majority of the Indus economy was based on internal agriculture, wheat, barley, and regional exchange. International trade was merely the icing on the cake. Therefore, the collapse must have been an internal matter, not a consequence of reduced Babylonian demand. This places the blame squarely back on internal stressors. C. The first cracks in the stone. The erosion of quality. Around 1900 B.C.E. The archaeological record begins to show tangible signs of fracture. the physical indicators of a gradual decline long before the final collapse. Erosion of architectural standards. The most noticeable change is the decay of the rigorous building codes that defined the civilization. Archaeological evidence. In the large cities, evidence emerges of increasingly shoddy, unplanned construction. Citizens began building smaller, disproportionate structures that encroached upon public spaces, roads, and communal areas. The high-quality, standardized fired bricks were increasingly replaced by reused bricks or poorer quality sun-dried bricks, suggesting a shortage of fuel or labor. Contradictory explanations for decline. The deterioration triggers a scholarly conflict regarding the root cause. The weakening authority hypothesis. The encroachment on public space suggests a profound weakening of the central authority, the Council of Merchants, or priests, which was no longer potent enough to enforce urban order and sanitation laws. The environmental economic stress hypothesis. The reduced quality might stem from environmental or economic pressure. Resources, fuel wood for firing bricks, became scarce due to climatic shifts, or a rapidly increasing, stressed population necessitated faster, cheaper construction methods. Cessation of international commerce. Indus seals and texts gradually vanish from the Mesopotamian archaeological record after 1900 BCE. This cessation is a clear, if tragic, sign that the IVC was retracting from the global stage, its highly functional trade infrastructure collapsing, perhaps due to internal instability or the disruption of transport routes. Shifting demographic structure. The population exodus. The great urban centers began to experience a dramatic population decrease or outright abandonment, while smaller, agriculturally focused settlements in the eastern and southeastern periphery flourished. The late Harappan period. This massive demographic shift is undeniable evidence that some profound ecological or social stress had pushed thousands of people to abandon the perfect urban centers. D. The prelude to the end. The hydrological crisis. These signs of decay lead us inexorably to the most compelling and scientifically supported scholarly controversy concerning the ultimate cause of decline: the water crisis and the vanishing Saraswati. The Saraswati Hakra problem. Many significant IVC settlements lay along the route of the ancient Saraswati Hakra river system, which geologists believe may have once been fed by the Sutlej and Yamuna rivers. Scientific research. Geology and climatology. Geological and satellite studies have provided scientific evidence of major shifts in the hydrological system. Crucially, research indicates that during the later Harappan period, this river system began to gradually dry up, potentially due to tectonic shifts, diverting its tributaries eastward, or an overall reduction in monsoon rainfall. The consequence: contradiction. The drying up of the Saraswati Hakra would have crippled massive agricultural centers, forcing the population to migrate eastward toward the more reliable Ganges basin, causing immense demographic stress and severely undermining the authority of the old river-dependent cities. While not an immediate disaster, this relentless environmental pressure over decades would have been impossible for the council-based, non-coercive government to manage. The orderly world of the IVC was slowly being choked by dust and thirst. The collapse of the IVC was not an instantaneous event, but a prolonged process spanning centuries, beginning with the erosion of urban order, the disruption of international trade, and ultimately, the failure to adapt to relentless environmental change. This is the tragic prelude to our final chapter. The civilization that built its prosperity on harmony and order was now struggling against internal chaos and the remorseless cruelty of nature. In the next segment, We will scrutinize the primary collapse theories, climate change, river shifts, and the invasion hypothesis, and detail how modern science has fundamentally challenged the old explanations, leading to a nuanced, yet deeply sad, conclusion. The cracks in the stone, the hypotheses of the silent end. In the previous sections, we witnessed the rise of a society built on order, cleanliness, and non-aggression. And we observed the early, subtle cracks forming in its meticulously planned facade around 1900 B.C. E. Now, we arrive at the heart of the enigma. What truly dismantled the perfect structure of the Indus Valley civilization? The answers are manifold, shrouded in dust and colored by decades of shifting scientific and political narratives. The end of the IVC was not a single, catastrophic moment, but a protracted process of decline, catalyzed by overwhelming environmental and social stressors. Scholars have proposed three main competing hypotheses for this silent dissolution, each carrying its own weight of evidence and controversy. A. The theory of conquest, the old narrative of the Aryan invasion. For decades, particularly through the mid-23th century, the dominant narrative surrounding the IVC's end was one of violence and conquest. This was known as the Aryan invasion theory. The core argument, the old guard, promulgated primarily by archaeologists like Sir Mortimer Wheeler, the theory suggested that the decline and ultimate demise of the major cities were brought about by the arrival of fierce, nomadic, charioteering tribes known as the Indo-Aryans. This was based on interpretations of the Rig Veda, ancient Hindu texts, which speak of the destruction of fortified towns, puras, and conflict with a dark-skinned people. Archaeological evidence, the mohenjo-daro skeletons. The physical foundation of this theory rested on the discovery of several groups of skeletons scattered haphazardly in the streets and houses of Mohenjo-daro. Wheeler famously interpreted these remains as evidence of a massacre, the final, violent end delivered by the invading Aryans. The modern scientific rebuttal, the tectonic shift in archaeology. The Aryan invasion theory is now largely rejected by mainstream archaeology and history for two critical reasons, illustrating a major shift in modern scholarly consensus. Forensic reanalysis of the skeletons. Detailed forensic studies conducted decades later revealed that the scattered skeletons did not die at the same time. The remains belonged to different chronological periods, suggesting isolated incidents of violence or death, not a single, organized massacre. Furthermore, the cause of death often appeared to be disease or simple abandonment, not violent trauma consistent with organized invasion. Chronological and linguistic contradiction. Linguistic and genetic evidence strongly supports the idea that the Indo-Aryan arrival in the subcontinent was a slow, multi-generational migration over centuries, beginning after the initial decline of the mature Harappan phase. This contradicts the notion of a swift, destructive invasion. The culture of the late Harappan period shows evidence of continuity and regional adaptation, not complete cultural replacement. This fundamental refutation of the invasion hypothesis shifts the focus entirely. If external violence was not the cause, the trigger must have been internal, or, more likely, environmental. B. The theory of hydrological chaos. The river's betrayal. If men did not destroy the IVC, perhaps the source of their life, the mighty rivers, did. This hypothesis focuses on the capricious nature of the Indus River system. The twofold hydrological threat. The IVC faced contradictory water threats, flooding and desiccation. The flooding hypothesis. The Mohenjo-daro obsession. Scholars noted the immense effort put into continuously rebuilding and raising the foundations of cities like Mohenjo-daro, which was constructed on artificial mounds. This led to the theory that relentless, catastrophic flooding, perhaps due to a tectonic uplift, creating a natural dam downstream, finally overwhelmed the cities, making them unlivable. This suggests the IVC was fighting a losing battle against the very rivers that sustained them. The desiccation hypothesis, the vanishing Saraswati. As explored in the previous section, the most significant environmental threat was the gradual drying up of the Ghaggar-Hakra system, identified by many as the Vedic Saraswati River, which nourished hundreds of settlements, particularly in the eastern region. Scientific evidence and mismatched timelines. Geological mapping. Modern satellite imagery and geological core sampling provide clear scientific proof that major tributaries, specifically the Sutlej and Yamuna, diverted their courses eastward, critically reducing the water supply to the Ghaggar-Hakra system around 2000 B.C.E. The chronological contradiction. However, this drying process was gradual, spanning centuries. This leads to a crucial academic conflict. While the drying up of the Saraswati forced a massive demographic shift eastward, the late Harappan phase, it does not fully explain the decline in urban quality and order that occurred before the river completely vanished. The population adapted and moved. The question is, why the system of governance and standardization collapsed even where rivers remained reliable, like the main Indus Channel. Image showing a map tracing the ancient course of the Ghaggar-Hakra River and the diversion of the Sutlej and Yamuna tributaries. The hydrological chaos was clearly a massive stressor, causing fragmentation and mass migration. Yet, many scholars believe the ultimate trigger was even broader and more fundamental. C. The theory of climate change, the global drought event. The most widely accepted, scientifically robust hypothesis today places the blame on a global climatic event that fundamentally undermined the IVC's agricultural base. The core argument: the mega-drought. This theory is based on the identification of the 4.2 kiloyear event. A pronounced, multi-century drought and cooling period that affected large parts of the globe, including Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indian subcontinent, starting around 2200 B.C.E. Scientific evidence, the paleoclimatology record. The evidence for this shift is drawn from interdisciplinary scientific studies. Ocean sediment cores. Studies of deep-sea sediment cores retrieved from the Arabian Sea show a dramatic decrease in monsoonal rainfall. Around the critical period, 2200, 1900 B.C.E. Less monsoon rain meant less water for the critical rain-fed tributaries and a general decline in soil moisture. Cave stalagmite analysis. Analysis of isotopic data from stalagmites in caves across the subcontinent provides high-resolution data, confirming a long-term weakening of the monsoon for several centuries. The consequence and the governance failure. Unlike the swift blow of an invasion, the climate shift delivered a slow, relentless squeeze on the IVC. Agricultural stress. The IVC was heavily reliant on two seasonal harvests. The winter, rabi crop, sustained by winter rainfall, and the summer, kharif crop, dependent on the monsoon. The weakening monsoon dramatically destabilized their sophisticated agricultural base, leading to prolonged food insecurity. The failure of the perfect system. This leads to the most profound philosophical contradiction of the entire story. The IVC's non-coercive, consensus-based governance system, which was perfectly adapted for managing order and trade in times of peace and plenty, was utterly unsuited to managing existential crisis. When faced with continuous famine, where did the authority of the Council of Merchants lie? The system of communal good, built on the assumption of surplus, began to fracture under scarcity. The strict standardization that defined their peak became an obstacle to innovation and adaptation. Desynthesis, the fragmentation and the legacy of decline. Today, the scholarly consensus is not one of a single cause, but a multifactorial collapse, a synthesis where environmental stresses amplified internal social and political weaknesses. Environmental shock, the mega-drought, climate change, and the Saraswati River shift delivered the initial, fatal blow to the agricultural economy,
triggering massive waves of migration, political, social, fragility. The decentralized, non-coercive government, lacking the coercive power of a king or the centralized authority of a massive temple complex, was incapable of large-scale crisis management or forced resource redistribution. The system of order broke down, leading to the decay of urban standards, the encroachment on streets, the poor quality bricks we saw in Section 4, economic disruption. The internal chaos led to the collapse of the trade network and the isolation of the remaining urban centers, accelerating the decline. The late Harappan phase, starting c. 1900 B. C. E. was therefore not an end, but a de-urbanization and regionalization. The people of the IVC did not vanish. They simply changed their way of life. They moved east, blending their cultures with others, abandoning the complex, ordered city life for simpler, agrarian existences in smaller settlements. The mystery of the Indus Valley civilization is thus a profound lesson in the fragility of perfection, a society that mastered the art of living well, but failed to master the art of survival when the climate turned against them. Their silent end serves as a poignant reminder that even the most meticulously ordered human endeavors are utterly dependent on the stability of the natural world. We have traced their rise, explored their enigma, and understood their complex demise. In our final, gentle epilogue, we will reflect on the echoes of the Indus people, the subtle, enduring legacy they left, woven into the very fabric of modern South Asian culture. V. The legacy of the river, continuity and traces in modern culture. We have witnessed the perfect dawn of an era and the complex, slow dissolution that followed. The collapse of the Indus Valley Civilization, IVC, was not the annihilation of a people, but the transformation of a way of life. Like river water seeping into the earth, their legacy did not simply vanish. It transformed, blending into the tapestry of successor cultures. Section V established that the IVC was not destroyed by a single invasion, but by a prolonged environmental crisis that fatally weakened their economic and social foundations. Thousands migrated away from the brittle urban centers, seeking water and fertile land to the east and south. It is in this quiet, centuries-long migration that the IVC's most enduring traces were preserved and transmitted. A. Cultural metamorphosis. From city to agrarian life. The period following 1900 BC E, known as the late Harappan phase, was not a historical void, but a long, complex process of de-urbanization and regionalization. The cities died, but the people endured. Evidence of material continuity. Archaeologists have found clear, subtle evidence that the Indus identity persisted. Pottery styles. While the sheer craftsmanship declined, the forms and motifs of late Harappan pottery retained clear lineages from the mature Harappan phase. Key design elements, the use of the pipal leaf, geometric patterns, and specific vessel shapes continued, demonstrating a deep-seated cultural memory. Farming techniques. The precise methods of agriculture, including the cultivation of wheat, barley, and later rice, continued to be employed in the new, decentralized settlements. The focus on reliable, high-yield crops remained a central feature of their inherited economic strategy. The cultural blending controversy. The birth of the subcontinent. This is where the most significant academic debate regarding the origins of modern South Asian identity lies. The old paradigm, replacement theory. The outdated view held that the invading Aryans replaced the Indus culture, leading to an abrupt, singular cultural change. The modern consensus, assimilation and blending. Contemporary, genetic, archaeological, and linguistic studies overwhelmingly reject this, arguing that the process was one of slow, complex assimilation and blending. The migrating Indus populations carried their cultural elements eastward and southward, These people then interacted with other groups, including the gradually migrating Indo-Aryan speaking groups. This profound synthesis gave birth to the Vedic culture that followed. The modern culture of India and Pakistan is, therefore, a deep amalgamation of both the sophisticated, organized, Proto-Dravidian elements of the Indus people and the linguistic, ritualistic elements brought by the Indo-Aryan speakers. The chaos of the decline did not result in total destruction. It resulted in a cultural restructuring, leading to a new foundation that was less centralized, but ultimately more resilient and flexible. The order of the city dissolved, but the order of the household and the farm persisted. B. Spiritual echoes. The IVC and modern Hinduism. Perhaps the most profound and recognizable legacy of the IVC is found in their religious and spiritual beliefs, creating an enduring cultural bridge that spans millennia into Hinduism and other Dharma traditions. Theological continuities. Lord Shiva, Pashupati. As discussed in Section 3, the Pashupati seal remains the single most striking piece of evidence. While controversy persists over whether the seal strictly represents Shiva, the clear iconography, the seated yogic figure, the horned headdress, surrounded by animals, Pashupati, Lord of Animals, bears an undeniable resemblance to the iconography of Shivaism. This strongly suggests that certain elements of Shiva worship had their roots in the IVC, survived the collapse, and were later formalized and integrated into the emerging Vedic system. The Indus people likely practiced a form of early yoga or meditation, further suggesting a deep spiritual practice long preceding the known Vedic era. The Mother Goddess. The ubiquity of the Mother Goddess figurines points to a fundamental reverence for the feminine divine, fertility, and the earth itself. This worship is the direct precursor to the intense reverence for female deities like Shakti, Parvati, and Kali within modern Hinduism. This enduring emphasis on the feminine principle provides a strong, traceable line from the Indus cities to the present day. Nature and animal veneration. The reverence for the peepal tree, the Bodhi tree, the distinctive zebu bull, seen on countless seals, and other animals demonstrates a sophisticated spiritual system intrinsically linked to the natural world. This philosophy of interconnectedness, where animals and plants possess spiritual sanctity, is clearly continued in modern religious customs across the subcontinent. Rituals of purity and ablution. The IVC's near-obsessive focus on bathing and public sanitation, the Great Bath, the elaborate sewer systems, was never just a matter of civil engineering. It embodied a deep belief system about ritual purity. The enduring custom, daily and ceremonial bathing in sacred rivers, especially the Ganges, is an inseparable feature of modern South Asian religious culture. Many scholars believe the IVC's emphasis on the sanctity of clean water and ritual washing is the deepest, oldest source of this ubiquitous custom. The act of personal purification was simply transferred from the communal public baths of Mohenjo-daro to the Ghats of Varanasi. C. The philosophical lesson. The fragility of order. Beyond cultural and religious legacy, the story of the IVC's quiet collapse provides a profound philosophical lesson about the nature of power, sustainability, and the ultimate fragility of human order. The power of non-coercion. A model of peace. The IVC stands as a rare historical case study of a major civilization that flourished in sustained peace for centuries. The near-total absence of war symbols demonstrates the viability of societies where power is decentralized, resting on consensus, civil organization, and shared values rather than military force. The ethical controversy. Their story forces us to ask, was their peace a strength or a fatal flaw? Some historians argue that their demilitarization left them vulnerable when confronted with relentless natural adversity. Others praise their philosophy as a model of social stability, arguing that their collapse was purely environmental, not systemic. The quiet efficiency of their system simply had no mechanism for martial, centralized crisis response. The climate dependency. A timeless warning. The collapse of the IVC is perhaps the most chillingly relevant example in ancient history of how sustained climate change can dismantle even the most organized civilizations. The modern relevance. The scientific research into the 4.2 kiloyear drought event is not merely an academic footnote. It is a quiet prophecy. Like the Indus people, our modern society relies on highly complex, globalized systems predicated on stable climate patterns. The IVC collapsed because of a centuries-long shift in the monsoon pattern, an event outside the capacity of their non-coercive, decentralized administration to control or mitigate. Their failure offers a poignant reminder that even the most advanced human structures are ultimately subordinate to the stability of the natural world. D. A soft epilogue, a promise to unsolved mysteries. In the end, even after all our exploration, examining the architecture, the economy, the religion, and the climate, the Indus Valley civilization retains its core secrets. The Indus script remains silent, refusing to divulge the names of its rulers, the tenets of its philosophy, or the precise nature of its faith. This silence is their eternal legacy. It forces us to accept that there are entire epochs and entire peoples whom we can never fully know, never entirely categorize or impose our own templates upon. We have walked the perfect brick streets of Mohenjo-daro. We have listened to the whispers of the wind over the ruins of Harappa. And we have felt the deep pathos of a civilization that chose order over power and serenity over spectacle. Their story ends not with a fanfare of triumph or the clamor of tragic defeat, but with quietude. It is the quietude of a river that has changed its course, the quietude of a city abandoned to the dust, and the quietude of a language forever buried. The Indus Valley civilization reminds us, even the most perfectly ordered structures crafted by human hands are fragile against the ceaseless flux of nature. True sustainability, perhaps, lies not in the grandeur of our constructions, but in the adaptability of the human spirit. Thank you for joining me on this deep, reflective journey with Slumbering Sagas. We will continue to seek out other forgotten historical narratives, where the greatest mysteries await our quiet contemplation.